Welcome to the video on molecular pharmaceutics, focusing on nanotechnology and targeted drug delivery systems. This is Unit Number 1, Part 5, presented by Dr. Krishna Yadav.
This video will focus on brain-targeted drug delivery. The diagram illustrates the fortified brain and the physiological and anatomical barriers, including the wall, guards, environment, and logistics, that challenge drug delivery to the CNS. Section 1.1 covers the clinical need for brain-specific drug delivery. CNS diseases like Alzheimer's and glioblastoma create an urgent need. The core problem is the inability to reach the target, not a lack of drug potency, as systemic chemotherapy fails against infiltrative tumor cells. The clinical paradox is potent drugs facing impassable walls. The blood-brain barrier blocks 98% of small molecules and 100% of large molecules. Infiltrative cells in glioblastoma remain protected, while systemic toxicity limits dose escalation. This slide further highlights the clinical imperative and potency paradox. While in vitro efficacy can be 100%, in vivo delivery can be 0% due to the blood-brain barrier restriction, not a lack of drug potency. Section 1.2 details the limitations of conventional CNS pharmacotherapy. Conventional therapy relies on passive diffusion and is severely limited by the BBB's strict requirements: lipid solubility, low molecular weight, and no affinity for efflux transporters. We trace the historical evolution of brain-targeting strategies from dye exclusion in 1914 to molecular Trojan horses and disruption techniques like focused ultrasound. The modern scope involves bridging pharmaceutical engineering with neurobiology. The scope and objectives of this unit include understanding biological barriers, exploring engineering strategies like nanocarriers, evaluating alternative routes such as nose-to-brain delivery, and bridging the gap between pharmaceutical engineering and neurobiology. Chapter 2 is dedicated to the neuroanatomy relevant to drug delivery. We will review the key anatomical structures and barriers that impact therapeutic agent transport to the brain. Section 2.1 introduces the structural organization of the CNS, defining compartments like the brain parenchyma, cerebrospinal fluid, and blood supply. We also highlight key barriers, the BBB and the BCSFB. Delivering a drug to the CSF does not guarantee deep brain penetration. This graphic summarizes the CNS compartments and the two major barriers, the blood-brain barrier and the blood-CSF barrier. It also visualizes the key concept that CSF delivery doesn't guarantee deep brain parenchyma penetration due to diffusion limitations. Section 2.2 focuses on cerebral vasculature and microcirculation. The cerebral microcirculation is a dense network with a total capillary length of 600 kilometers and a surface area of 20 square meters for drug exchange. Crucially, the sealed lumen geometry means no fenestrations. Section 2.3 details the structural components of the blood-brain barrier, which is a dynamic regulatory system called the neurovascular unit. Key components include endothelial cells, tight junctions, parasites, and astrocytic end feet. The neurovascular unit is a synergistic system where endothelial cells, parasites, and astrocytes collaborate to seal the vessel lumen. This illustration highlights the key cellular components and high electrical resistance of the endothelial cells. This detailed view of the neurovascular unit highlights its four main components: endothelial cells, tight junctions, parasites, and astrocyte end feet. The insert shows how the BBB functions as a primary obstacle to drug delivery. Section 2.4 covers the blood cerebrospinal fluid barrier, which is located at the choroid plexus. Unlike the BBB, its capillaries are leaky or fenestrated. Barrier function is provided by epithelial tight junctions, and rapid CSF turnover flushes drugs out, acting as a sink. Section 2.5 introduces the glymphatic system, a macroscopic waste clearance system. CSF flows along para-arterial spaces, exchanges with interstitial fluid, and clears along paravenous spaces. This clearance poses a challenge to therapeutic effect, but it offers an opportunity for convection-enhanced delivery. Chapter 3 will now focus on the physiology of the blood-brain barrier, covering various transport mechanisms that drugs must overcome to reach the brain. Section 3.1 details tight junction integrity, which forms a seal. Claudins and occludins create a high-resistance paracellular pathway, forcing molecular traffic through the transcellular route. The paracellular route is effectively blocked, making the transcellular route the only option for most drugs. Section 3.2 reviews transporter systems. Carrier-mediated transport uses small molecule carriers like GLUT1 and LAT1. Receptor-mediated transcytosis utilizes receptors like TFR for endocytosis and exocytosis. Adsorptive-mediated transcytosis relies on electrostatic interactions, exploiting cationic molecules. This image further illustrates the various transport systems at the blood-brain barrier, including passive diffusion, carrier transport, receptor-mediated processes, and active efflux. Section 3.3 focuses on efflux transporters, which are key pharmacokinetic barriers actively pumping xenobiotics back into the blood. Major players include P-glycoprotein, BCRP, and the MRP family, which remove drug conjugates and anti-cancer drugs. This table summarizes the major transport systems at the BBB. It details the mechanism, physiological substrates, and drug delivery relevance for paracellular diffusion, passive transcellular transport, CMT, RMT, AMT, and active efflux. Section 3.4 describes the enzymatic and metabolic barrier, or the, quote, metabolic firewall. Enzymes like peptidases, cytochrome P450, and monoamine oxidases degrade susceptible drugs during transit, reducing the effective payload reaching the brain. Chapter 4 explores pathophysiological changes in CNS disorders, focusing on how diseases alter the barrier function and affect drug delivery. Section 4.1 discusses brain tumors and blood tumor barrier disruption. Chaotic proliferation creates erratic, leaky vasculature, leading to the EPR effect where nanocarriers accumulate. However, this disruption is heterogeneous, and the invasive margin often retains an intact BBB, protecting satellite tumor cells. This slide visually compares the normal blood-brain barrier with the blood-tumor barrier, illustrating the leaky, chaotic nature of the tumor vasculature and the resulting enhanced permeability and retention effect. Section 4.2 examines neuroinflammation and barrier dysfunction. Inflammation acts as a double-edged sword. Cytokines can transiently open the BBB by downregulating tight junctions, but the inflammatory environment also upregulates PGP, which reduces net drug uptake. Section 4.3.1 addresses Alzheimer's disease. Reduced LRP1 expression and increased RAGE expression create a transport imbalance, contributing to the accumulation of amyloid beta plaques and tau tangles. Section 4.3.2 focuses on Parkinson's disease. The BBB shows increased permeability and localized inflammation. Loss of specific transporters and glymphatic dysfunction further restrict the distribution of neuroprotective agents. Section 4.4 on stroke and ischemic injury describes the biphasic blood-brain barrier opening caused by acute hypoxia. Phase 1 involves matrix metalloproteinase activation and tight junction disassembly. Phase 2 is marked by vasogenic edema and a risk of hemorrhagic transformation, which complicates drug delivery. This image illustrates the impact of ischemic stroke, showing the tight junction disruption and the resulting vasogenic edema. The breakdown of the BBB is immediate but complex. Section 4.5 discusses epilepsy and the transporter hypothesis. Seizures lead to massive upregulation of P-glycoprotein and other efflux pumps, actively pushing anti-epileptic drugs out of the brain. This mechanism is the basis for drug resistance in refractory epilepsy. We now begin Chapter 5, focusing on the anatomical and physiological barriers to brain drug delivery, specifically analyzing these structures as obstacles to therapeutic agents. Sections 5.1 through 5.3 detail the physical and kinetic barriers. Tight junctions restrict pore size to less than 1 nanometer. Paracellular diffusion is negligible. Efflux-mediated clearance, like the PGP futile cycle, severely reduces brain drug concentrations. This diagram illustrates the physical barrier aspects, specifically the negligible paracellular route and the tight junctions that necessitate a transcellular strategy. Here, we visualize the efflux-mediated clearance by P-glycoprotein. The drug enters the endothelial cell but is immediately pumped back out into the blood vessel lumen, preventing effective CNS exposure. This image comprehensively summarizes the physical and kinetic barriers, showing tight junctions, various transporters, and the challenge of transcellular diffusion for non-lipophilic compounds. Sections 5.4 through 5.6 cover metabolic, systemic, and immunological barriers. Drugs may face enzymatic degradation, rapid systemic clearance by the liver and spleen requiring pegylation, and immunological surveillance leading to opsonization and phagocytosis. This visual representation highlights the fate of nanocarriers, including enzymatic degradation, systemic clearance by the reticuloendothelial system, and immunological neutralization, emphasizing the need for protective strategies like pegylation. Chapter 6 shifts focus to pathophysiology as an opportunity for targeting. We explore how disease states can be strategically leveraged to enhance drug delivery. This detailed graphic illustrates the different disease-driven opportunities, including leaky tumor vessels, inflammation-induced receptor upregulation, and the role of brain-specific receptors. We can exploit the EPR effect in tumors, use inflammation-induced receptor upregulation like ICAM1 for targeting, and utilize high-abundance receptors such as transferrin and insulin receptors for bispecific antibodies. Sections 6.4 through 6.6 explore further receptor and peptide-based opportunities. LRP1 receptor targeting with peptides like ANGIOPEP2 is clinically relevant for brain tumors. GLUT1 can be exploited using glycoconjugates. Additionally, peptide shuttle systems offer non-toxic mechanisms for CNS entry.
Thank you for watching this video. Please share and subscribe to my channel.